Okay, now let's move on to the next session, which is a panel discussion on the topic From Risk to Resilience in Finance. Challenges? The financial sector faces constant challenges, but the industry has shown great resilience when dealing with problems in the past. Although experts have been discussing the implications of new age risks that the industry will likely encounter, this session explores the potential threats to the sector and what measures can be taken to avoid these challenges. To take the session forward, I'd like to invite on stage Nitin Ajmera, Chief Financial Officer at New TSI Holdings, Inc.
Good morning, everybody. The power of women is just witnessed right here. We were 6, we have reduced to 5. But here we are. Thank you for having us. A very interesting topic. I think so. There's a lot said about risk in various books and everything. But the last 2 years have shown us what resilience is all about, right? The last man standing, the show must go on, and how do you get you can never prepare for what happened, but what if it happens again, right? And where are we and where can we go for that? Myself, Nitin Ajmera, I'm Chief Financial Officer for Townswood's New TSI Holdings, Inc. We are the company who went into bankruptcy because of the pandemic, came out of the pandemic, and hence we are New TSI, and I'm their CFO, and a lot had to do with the resilience of the company for its survival. So I'm here to moderate this session, and I'm here with great people from industry. Stephen Keys is joining us. He's from Expedient Tax. I have Ricardo. No, we don't have Ricardo, right? Sorry, we have Roland, who is the SVP and Chief Financial Officer of
Ricardo,
Wall Skills.
Roland or Ricardo, it doesn't matter. I'm kidding.
Okay.
Ricardo's not here. He's left the building.
Absolutely.
It's like Elvis. He's
yes,
gone.
We'll take Roland then, right. And I have Arthur here with us, who is the Director of Business Development at Side Pocket Corp. And we have Josh Kincaid, Portfolio Risk Analyst from FinTech company C3 Fund. We'll start the panel discussion with a quick introduction and what we each one of us think about risk and resilience and how it is shaping our worlds today. So any one of you can start with that.
I'll jump in. Basically, we had the pandemic hit. Life before that, at least from my perspective, was pretty relaxed and straightforward. I didn't have too many surprises. Pandemic hit, all of a sudden, I can't get toilet paper, I can't get food, and my job, all of a sudden I lost a couple clients, and then, since then, figuring out how to bounce back from that. And then all of a sudden, I thought I got it, and then Ukraine and Russia happened, and that made some waves. So I've learned that we can't really coast anymore. We got to be proactive in all areas of managing our business, our personal finance, and got to really stay on the ball as best as we can, and control as much as we can.
That's awesome, Arthur. Just to first off, my name is Stephen T. Keys. I am the founder and chairman of Expedient Tax Service. When I started Expedient Tax Service, our goal was to help entrepreneurs excel in business as far as helping them with their payroll tax, sales tax, anything that had to do with tax. As far as pre-pandemic, we were caught up in the way of doing business brick and mortar. Okay, so everybody just used to coming into the office, and like Arthur was saying, as soon as the pandemic hit, it was like a whole different wave. Like, oh my gosh, what happens when you can't go to the office? What happens when you can't connect with people face to face? So you're dealing with so many challenges because we were so used to doing things in a way that we were taught, pre-pandemic. So when this new wave hit, wow, you can't even get toilet paper from the store. So it's like, how do we now connect with this new? How do we change with change? When we're so used to interacting with people and so used to being face to face, and then all of a sudden, we're not able to do those things anymore. So what happened with us was we had to actually. We had to think of a way to utilize technology that people were able to still get the same service as if they were face-to-face with us, okay? We had to transition, of course, to Zoom, virtual, and we had to come up with technology such as apps or some type of way that we were able to still service those clients as if they were face-to-face with us. So overcoming those challenges, we did lose we lost people that weren't able to be advanced in technology, you know, because they were so used to the old way of doing everything. So we had to think of a way like, oh my gosh, how can they send over documents? How can it be as secure as that file cabinet being locked, you know, with the key? How can we, you know, have people email us or, you know, if they're using an app, you know, what is this way? You know, that those challenges, those things we had to actually think of to make sure that we still service the clients and all the information was secure.
These guys are stealing our thunder. Quick introduction, Roland Newkirk, not Ricardo. This one's for Sandy, actually. So I'm the cliche bank executive up here talking about banking and risk. Hopefully I'll show you that I'm not the average male and certainly not the average banker. 30-year bank veteran. I'm currently the chief lending officer of a small community bank in upstate New York. I've run the gamut of different positions, mostly in the lending and credit risk space. So I'd like to delve into that here today, talk about, you know, we're hitting the topics of, sure, what happened in the pandemic. And when we talk about risk to resilience, how are we managing risk right before the pandemic? What happened when the pandemic hit? And then, you know, what does the sort of new world order look like from a risk and resilience perspective? So hopefully we'll get into that. Thank you.
I'm Josh Kincaid. I'm speaking on behalf of Roland over here. Ricardo, thank you. Yeah, sorry, he's kind of quiet. Risk to resilience, I think, can be summed up in one word, and I think right now we're just looking at volatility. So what we saw was just in time to just in case. That transition pre-pandemic of, you know, it'll be there, I'm going to grab it, to, oh, the toilet paper's not there. You couple that with the Great Resignation, and all of a sudden you have lockdowns, you have shortages, and that's not turning around anytime soon. So when you have, you know, volatility, people generally were looking for appreciation in terms of, you know, an IPO. Then they got a little bit more speculative as, you know, quantitative easing kind of, we're printing out more money, that's debasing our currency, it's creating a lot of expenses. So I don't believe that, you know, housing prices, for example, are increasing. I think it's a result of more dollars for the same goods and services. All of that has been a result of the pandemic and that need for capital preservation and that drive for what we're seeing for volatility and taking more risks. So ultimately, it's a matter of utilizing technology, machine learning and artificial intelligence to get a higher return for you and reduce your overall risks. You can do that with technology and try to take advantage of the volatility. Bitcoin is a perfect example, commodities, options, and even taking advantage of, you know, the situation over in Russia. So commodities are a perfect example for that. So as terrible as it is, you can convert your risks to capital preservation and resilience utilizing technology.
Thank you. I think so. All of you have highlighted this, but let's go a little more deeper because I think so. A lot of us have survived the pandemic because of the technology. Obviously, it's very difficult to learn how to use a Zoom or Microsoft Teams or anything else overnight. And guess what? Each one of them has placed their click buttons differently on the screen. So you're like trying to find out where to go where. But how does technology come into play in this world of resilience? It has always tried to manage the risk for us from a financial risk perspective. But where is it showing up for resilience and how far will it go?
I'll jump in. It's like it's using technology to get a competitive edge, right? Getting an edge on all this shifts in our landscapes. So, like for example, the CEO of Side Pocket, Daniel Chowski, I know him for a long time, and once the pandemic hit, he came from managing an $8 billion hedge fund. He was running trading strategies himself. So pandemic hit, he's trading on his own. He's sending signals to his friends and family, of moves you can make to make money, and people are making money following his trades. And at the same time, that's an example of like, all right, he has the knowledge, the IP, the way to make good decisions, and he was passing it on to his friends and family network. What we did was we automated that whole process where now people can use our app to just have their money actively managed following strategies that are proven. And it's just, what we did was we took what was working in that scenario, that was very real world, and automated that process. And now we created technology that we can leverage to actively trade. Because, I mean, unless you're glued to your monitor 24/7 and you're really in the world, you don't know how to recognize trends, and most investors don't do that. My mom, she lost 30% of her portfolio for her 401k when the pandemic hit, and she didn't find that out until after she got off work. She had no chance to make any adjustments last second. So now with having technology available to support us, we can just go on with our day-to-day work, hang out with our kids, hang out with our family, and we know that our money is being managed appropriately to minimize exposure to crashes, and also proactively to maximize exposure to gains.
Great point. I think, from a technology standpoint, from the banking sector, of course it's important. And especially if you look at sort of community banking, we're always sort of lagging behind. We don't have the same budgets of, Citi, Chase, Wells Fargo, what have you. But technology has always played a role, I think since the Y2K sort of, thing that never happened. But we had to get up to speed, and we had to be there. And luckily, we did have those technological resources in place, and they might not have been the best, but when you think about what happened you talk about risk and resilience and how resilient the banking sector was, we got notified, at least in New York, we're notified on March 15th, hey, March 17th, everything is shutting down. And it was sort of that, I won't say it, but aha moment of, what are we gonna do? We're all just kind of looking around at each other like, all right, what do we do now? And by that Monday morning, we were ready. Okay, the branches had to be closed. No one could be in. We had to deal with the mask and remote work. And do we have enough VPNs? Do we have enough laptops for the employees that don't have laptops? And it was a mad scramble, but we did it. And, technology was the reason. As a sector, are banks generally behind? Smaller banks, absolutely, from a technological standpoint. But having that strong foundation is what's making us, resilient today through the pandemic and now post-pandemic. It's become even more important.
Yeah, to that point, I think statistically you can see the increasing amount of companies, both traditional financial institutions and otherwise, utilizing technology right now. Those that are using ML and AI, not to be confused with an algorithm. I'm talking about learning. If you're just starting out now, you're an infant. For a company like Toro Alerts that started in 2016, we're the equivalent of a teenager and growing. So it's that learning experience, I think, that's going to differentiate from everybody else. Those that aren't using it right now are going to be left in the dust. The hockey stick projection of those that are going to be incorporating technologies to get through the volatility. As this 10-year bull market comes to an end, there's an entire generation of traders who have never seen volatility. They don't know what a correction, depression, or recession looks like, and they don't know how to react or respond. When you have an emotional response, it's a terrible reaction and a terrible response in most cases. So removing that emotion and utilizing Wall Street technology for Main Street, I think is going to be easily seen in just a couple of years down the road as all of these institutional investors utilize AI and ML into their portfolios. They're still going to have human traders using that, so it's like a technical tool in their toolbox. They still may have a human execute, but they all eventually will be utilizing this technology because there's a lot more risk. It's not this go-go market. There's going to be an incredible amount of volatility, and in order to have capital preservation, you need that technology in order to survive.
Absolutely. I think technology now is the key. Because what we wasn't utilizing it before was we were thinking about the risk factors of what can go wrong. But because of what happened, it's more about what can go right about it. And when it came to transitioning over, I feel like the millennials were already prepared for it because they had been using technology the whole time. And when we had clients, from experience, that wasn't used to it, the first thing we would say, hey, do you have a niece, nephew, a grandson, or, somebody of that millennial stature that actually knows how to do it, that can help and assist you with it. And I think it's just going to get better. It's just going to get greater. And technology actually, because of this pandemic, it has brought people closer together, utilizing Zooms. If you had parties, if you had business meetings, if you couldn't attend, it took the pressure off of having to get on the flight, having to, see family face to face. But the Zoom and the technology has made it effectively made it more effective for people to connect that wasn't able to connect in ways of not utilizing technology.
Great. For us, technology became both a competitor and a provider, because in health and fitness, when all the clubs closed down and you could not go to a gym to do your exercising, obviously you see the rise of the Mirror and the Peloton, where everyone jumped onto that. So they became our competitors. At the same time, we immediately had to switch over, and literally we started with FaceTime as a starting point of doing personal training sessions. I think so we are one of the last industries where we still have a human-to-human interaction other than education, and we had to pull it out using technology right away. So, but as we study resilience and as we study risk, right, one of the things that will be debated in future, and it is being debated very heavily in political circles today, and we see that in our society, but does the government facilitate resilience during such times, or is government blocking resilience during these times, right? Because I know it may get a little political, but let's not go there. But just identify more from a role of a government in allowing resilience, because they always think that they are trying to be supporting the businesses to be resilient, but I felt many times they were blocking us from being resilient. So what do you think?
I'll put a counterpoint to that, and politics aside, the government never does things great or super efficiently or anything else, but I think the reason we are where we are today, just in terms of wealth that's been created, the market where it is, the real estate market where it is 100% due to the manner and speed and amount that was put out in the PPP and the IDL system. That was the soft landing. When you talk about risk and resilience, and what were we as a banking industry worried about from a risk perspective when we got the call that, hey, you're shutting down. What are we going to do? How are we going to get through this? How are our borrowers going to get through this? We're going to have massive defaults. We're going to have massive failures. Or we got to put more money into the loan allowance. And then PPP was dispersed. And you could argue that PPP and the EIDL loans, granted, there's some inefficiencies, right? And there was some fraud out there that went out there. But generally speaking, it's probably going to turn out historically to be the largest generational transfer of wealth and wealth creation, next to the baby boom. So I think it worked, and it's probably the reason we're at the soft landing we are today. You could argue that, the real estate guy, of course, when a real estate guy talks about that there's not a bubble, there's probably a bubble. That's the time to sell, just as a general rule. But when you talk about sort of where we were, where we are, and how is that going to work out moving forward, I think that certainly propped us up to get us moving forward. It may now be artificially propping us up as those PPP loans get forgiven, the funds are all spent, but now we're facing, this huge inflationary pressure. So we've got the inflation, goods are costing higher, cost of goods are more, net profits maybe going to be less, and that's where we start to see maybe that, what your point is, hindering a little bit of the growth, because it's been a crutch for a lot of businesses. But nonetheless, it's helped us be where we are today.
Sure. Before we all continue, we are the biggest beneficiaries of the PPP and the EIDL. So I am, as I said, I'm on the cusp on this whole issue, but that's
yes, absolutely. And I feel that those PPPs, those EIDLs, that opened up for businesses to become resilient. It gave them motivation and a little bit more confidence, especially being able to get those funds where it wasn't available before because of restrictions and certain criterias. Like Roel was saying, not the people that was the fraud, but for the people that actually benefited from it and was actually using the funds appropriately. And it's all about, because when you're resilient, when you're using resilience, it's all about health. It's all about wealth. It's all about not focusing on the area of where you got to go back to the drawing board, to where you failed, and learn from those mistakes. That's the best thing to do. And when those EIDLs and those PPPs came out, it gave people that. It gave them that resilience to say, you know what, hey, now I can use this. I can go back to the drawing board. I can see where we erred at. I can invest in more technology, into something that we didn't have before. Because especially with banking, it became really bad to where no one even wanted to go into the office anymore, especially for the banks. And there was a shortage of
Some still
bankers.
don't want to come back to the office.
Right, so that never did. So we got so laxy-daisy, being at home. Who would have wanted to come back to the office, So those were realistic things, because now we learned, like, hey, some of these things that we were doing before, we can do it at home, and build a better way to do it, a better system to do it. So that's resilience, like getting your mind together, going back to the drawing board, creating a new plan. If it didn't work before, hey, what can we do to utilize these funds now to actually make it work? Okay.
Thank you.
The short answer is no. I don't think the government is trying to help with resilience. I think it's more a matter of the velocity of money. So the petrodollar is been defunct. So Saudi Arabia is not selling oil specifically in U.S. dollars. And if the velocity of money doesn't increase, then that means the international community is not using dollars. When those dollars come back to us, that comes back in the form of inflation. I don't know if you guys have noticed inflation, but it's here. So perfect timing is going to be 2024 when SOFR, or the LIBOR, the London Interbank Offer Rate, switches to SOFR, the standard overnight funding rate, from London to New York. That'll be a perfect time for central bank digital coins, CBDCs, to be implemented. That's not a result of ingenuity. That's not innovation. That's them looking at wanting to have complete control, to be completely candid with you. This is a matter of having negative interest rates. You can't have a bank run. This is about control and monetization. It's not about ingenuity or resilience. So that's kind of my timeline. That's my crystal ball. That's what I'm looking at. And it's not a matter of trying to help the small guy. It's a matter of competition. So the regulation of cryptocurrency is a result of the inevitable CBDCs that we're going to see in about 2 years.
Thank you.
Well, it's kind of sounding like they did what they need to do, and then we take whatever they did, and it's on us to figure out how to take those opportunities, those loans, PPPs, to invest, adjust, and pivot. And from a business development standpoint, I just got way more efficient during my day because it was way more appropriate to not meet face to face. So all of a sudden I could take twice as many meetings and made the most of it. It was good.
Great. Early in January of 2020, I was in a discussion with one of our vendors, and they hypothetically told me, what if a black swan event happens, and how would you as a company survive? And I was like, why would a black swan event even ever happen? And what are you talking about? And why do you think we are so risky company? And it became a very them versus me kind of a discussion. 2.5 months later, we were in a black swan event, right? Because we had never witnessed this. And obviously this generation and quite a few of us will learn from what and how we became resilient and how we managed our risks. But we are also the generation and the people who forget very fast. So what would you want us to carry forward into future if the future has arrived and things are going to get normal and going back to normal? What should we keep with us as closing remarks through this panel discussion? What do you think?
I think, some of the, when we talk about that risk, resilience, what did it look like pre-pandemic? What does it look like post-pandemic? And how do we carry that forward? I think a lot of it really has to do with lessons learned. And, they talk about in banking, so banking risk in general. We're always sort of at least on the credit risk side, I'm the wet blanket. My boss says I suck the air out of the room when I walk in because it just, every answer is no before it's yes and all that. But I learned that as a kid. So anyway, but the point being, did we learn things and do we learn things? And I think prior to the 2008 recession, you could say, every economic cycle, history repeats itself. You learn lessons and then you unlearn them, and then you make the same mistakes again. 2008 was evidence of that. I mean, quick story on that. I was out here. I lived here for 7 years. So I was out here during that recession. So I think that recession where banks, that was, the proverbial black swan, right? That we talked about and planned for, but no one ever thought it was going to happen. Just like, we'll never see a 400 basis point rate shock. Well, guess what? You're going to see 400 basis points this year. In all likelihood, you've already seen 200. So what did we learn? Well, we didn't know what we were doing. We messed up as an industry, right? But we learned those lessons, and that sort of allowed, in addition to the government support, that allowed for that soft landing because credit risk, underwriting risk, the no-doc loans, all of your borrowers, all your businesses were better set up because banks got a little bit more conservative and learned that lesson. So fast forward to getting to the heart of the matter, where are we today and what are the lessons learned? I think you can carry those forward that we have learned an awful lot in terms of technology, remote work. Can it work? Yes, it can. How does that change how I move forward? How does it change how I interview and who I hire for certain positions? Do I have to have a loan processor or underwriter working under my roof, or could they be out in Ohio somewhere, or California for that matter? As long as they've got the experience, why not? So some of those lessons you learn, and you look at some of the businesses too, they've done a fantastic job of sort of learning what their new niche or their new normal is and working towards that. And I mean, I see it, and I've commented to friends that I see it in the casinos, right? When I used to live out here, you'd never see a restaurant closed midday, especially one on the Strip. And as we're walking through this hotel, I couldn't go to CPK for lunch yesterday, still wasn't open. It's the middle of the day. I think there were only 2 restaurants open. But what did they learn? They learned that those restaurants don't need to be open. We can just funnel them somewhere else and we'll still make the same profit margin and don't have to have all that extra staff on hand. Relate that to, upstate New York, small town where I live. I had a restaurateur coming to me for a business loan, always the higher risk ones. But, he was one of those typical restaurants, open 6 days a week, closed one day. Post-pandemic, he's open 3 days. His sales are down, but his margins are better. And he figured it out. So I think those are some of the, when you talk about that, there's so many lessons that we have learned, but from a resilience standpoint, I think the new normal is people are just figuring out what works for them and executing on it versus what should work for the public at large. If it works for you and you do well at it, go with it.
Great.
Yeah, one thing that popped up right there was that, just how so many people, everyone looking for labor and they can't find it, and because we've gotten more conscious now that, hey, you know what, if we're going to be working, if we're going to be taking jobs, we might as well do what we want to do and really leverage that energy just to reposition ourselves as individuals into better roles. And I think just if anything, when you touch the fire, it's hot, it raises your level of consciousness of what's going on, and that, hey, it is actually in your power, in your control as an individual, as a business leader, as, just a member of society to at least cover your own tracks and make sure that you have your ducks in a row and position yourself to, again, be more resilient and manage your risks by being more resilient.
Yes, absolutely. And I feel that from risk to resilience, that helped us strengthen and not get too comfortable where we were, because once that new cycle hits, it's always something to go back to the drawing board for. It's always something to learn again. And once we think we have it figured out, that's when we don't have it figured out. It's going to always be some type of challenge that comes to us businesses. Like Ro was saying, in the 2008 market, it affected real estate, it affected banks, and now in our new trend, it affected all of businesses all over the globe. And now we're utilizing the risks. We're transforming those risks into resilience for us to be able to come and for us to be able to adapt into a new era of doing things. And the best thing that we can do now is to utilize the technology that we have, the technology that is coming forth, that is a new set of trend, where we probably were not thinking that it would be such a good idea back then, but now, as far as the millennials, they are actually like, hey, we were doing technology all along, the whole time, So that's something that I think we need to stay focused in.
And then for me, I'm just using more planning and looking at more downside risk potential. So I'm personally holding physical gold and silver. I'm looking at the everything bubble. I think it's incredibly frothy out there, and I'm kind of waiting for that transition for CBDCs. So for me, I'm utilizing the same technology that Goldman Sachs used for 5 years and zero trading losses, and that's AI and ML for my personal portfolio. And then for any kind of hedging, I have physical precious metals.
Great. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be on stage with all of you, Stephen, Arthur, Roland, and Josh. We are at 0.00, but if there are any questions, we would take a few questions if there are any.
Yes, sir. Thank you. With everything that you have been discussing today, you've appropriately identified the assets of personnel and the technologies you have, discussing how technologies can help you leverage that risk. Outside of maintaining personnel workforce, using emerging technologies to identify potential risks that are coming, in other words, how outside of technology, what other tools should every bank or organization be considering to mitigate risk?
I think from my end, really relationships, that like having that with your key stakeholders, having that mentality, that vibe that, hey, we're in this together, like things can shift and fall as they may, new technologies, new opportunities, at the end of the day, we're on the same team. And I think that's been a huge for me, because things have shifted, and if the focus is not, hey, we're still related, we're still in this together, then we'll start blaming each other and having non-productive conversations. So outside of technology and personnel, and I think that's one key focus that would really help.
Yeah, I think that does tie into, it's still sort of the human resource element, which for, our industries, that's key. And it's key for every industry, right, is that human element, and what are you doing to help them? I mean, technology is a big thing. You talk about banks, especially smaller banks like ours, AI, ML, we're not there yet. My CEO, who's younger than me, doesn't really want to be there. He wants to be that traditional, George Bailey bank in upstate New York, but I'm trying to push that agenda that we can be much more efficient, we can do these things. So I'd like to bring in AI, ML, into the credit risk and just overall risk modeling process, and I think we're going to be forced to. But then that also does tie into, I think everything does, there's nothing really outside the human element. That's one of the bigger risks that we always have, whether it's related to, hacker risk, cybersecurity risk. How good are your systems? Well, it's as good as the people that are working those systems. So it's really focusing on getting the right talent, taking care of them the way they want to be taken care of, and fostering them, but sort of, unfortunately, making your organization now fit the model of what they want. It's really the employee-driven marketplace that we're in right now, and so whether it's wages or remote work or flex time, these are all the things that we have to deal with to stay relevant, so that we can sort of continue into the future and not be obsolete.
Absolutely, and also what I feel is partnerships that strengthens up outside of technology is that, like, hey, we all businesses, we all in this together. What we don't do, maybe you guys do. That would help strengthen outside of technology and still have that relationship, as Arthur was saying. But partnerships is the key, and learning that we all have to work together.
Sure, and I think so. One important aspect there is we need to right size, right? So days of it is okay or we have the money and we just spend it, that has to be checked, because the waste that we have, not only it will help the whole green revolution that we want, but also will increase the bottom line. And we heard some of the examples how opening the restaurant for 3 days improved margins rather than keeping it open for 7 days. So we need to really understand that part of our social fabric and understand what is required for a 24/7 or not. So I think so we had one more question somewhere. Yes.
Hi. Could you please expound on the phase change that you see coming in 2024?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. The what coming?
The changes coming in 2024.
So in 2024, the London Interbank Offer Rate is what a lot of the loans are tied to. So it was determined that that was fraudulent. I know it's pretty crazy to think, but it was a fraudulent loan. So the U.S. was going to pull the London Interbank Offer Rate, the LIBOR, to New York. So that's going to happen in 2024. There's about, I don't know how, it's a lot. It's 80 trillion or something in loans. It's a lot of money. So to anticipate all of those funds to come over from a fixed rate into a variable rate and not have anything go wrong is naive. So when all of that money comes over to SOFR and they start, manipulating that in their own way, and coupling that with the central bank digital coin, I think there's going to be a lot of volatility thrown into the new way that we work, digitally only. What does that mean? Instead of 0.5% savings rate, you're going to have negative 0.5 savings rate. You're going to be paying for that service. What is it going to do to the valuation? I don't have an answer for you. I just know that you should plan for volatility, and shortages are going to continue with the Great Resignation and lockdowns. And so for the next 18 months, I think there's going to be a lot of distractions. And I'm not saying war is a distraction, but there's a lot of, for example, why aren't we talking about Georgia when Russia invaded Georgia in 2014? Why aren't we all wearing pins that say, go Georgia, people of Georgia? It's all about the Ukrainians. Why? If you don't know why, think about it. I'm not going to tell you, but it's a distraction. So we're going to see a lot of distractions for the next 18 months to 24 months. And then when that hits the fan, you need to be prepared.
Thank you. Thank you, Money2.0. Thank you to a great panel. And thank you to all of you. It was great being up here today.
Thank you as
Thank
well.
you.
Thank you all. Thanks.